What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're getting into my February 28th bracketology, the final one of February. My, oh my, what a weekend of college basketball. We had so many crazy finishes from that Arizona State buzzer beater against Arizona, half court heave, to the Iowa comeback against Michigan State down by like 10 with like 40 seconds left, to a bunch of other upsets like Florida State beating Miami with a buzzer beater shot. Just a ton of crazy upset. That was Miami's first home loss of the year. Michigan beating Wisconsin by a buzzer beater at home, to get a huge win for their or for their tournament hopes. We also had the San Diego State huge win against New Mexico. Man, New Mexico just cannot catch a break right now. It's looking like they're going to have to go through the entire Mountain West right now to win, to make the tournament. No automatic qualifier for them. But yeah, let's look at this whole bracket, though. The bracket watch, the top overall seed is Alabama still. First team out, North Carolina, getting a huge win against Virginia. They needed that bad, and they beat, I'm not sure, but they beat someone last night. I want to say it was Syracuse. Or no, Florida State. That's who it was. Yeah, North Carolina beat Florida State last night. And then the last team in, as I mentioned, the Sun Devils. Huge win against number 7-6. I'm not sure. I think it was 7. Arizona in their rivalry game as well on the road. Huge win for Arizona State to get into the last team in. All right, but if we look at the bubble, it just continues to tighten here. As the last four buys, Memphis right there getting a big win against Cincinnati on Sunday. West Virginia beating Iowa State last night. That's a huge win for them. Yeah, I mean, every game in the Big 12 is like a quad one win, so I don't really see West Virginia falling out at this point. Maybe if they get crushed on Saturday and lose bad in the Big 12 tournament, but that was a huge win for West Virginia. And then Nevada, tough loss to Wyoming. I still really believe in that program, as well as Auburn getting crushed by Kentucky. Last four in, Mississippi State beating Texas A&M, one of the best teams in the SEC this year. Huge win for them. And then we got Boise State, Wisconsin, as I mentioned, losing to Michigan right there. And then Arizona State, obviously, with that half-court win against Arizona. And then the first four out, we got North Carolina. Oklahoma State could not complete the comeback last night against Baylor. Clemson, after that loss against Louisville, they've had two really big wins against Syracuse and NC State, trying to fight their way back into the tournament. And then we got Michigan, as I mentioned, beating Wisconsin. Next for out, we got Utah State, Charleston, Penn State suffering a tough loss, just barely to Rutgers on Sunday. And then Texas Tech just barely losing to TCU over the weekend. All right, but if we look at the movement here, Arizona State, obviously new to the field at an 11 seed, and then Boise State going to be dropping down to an 11 seed. In the South region, Alabama is the number 1 seed right there, and then we got San Diego State jumping up to a 5 seed. They're playing good basketball right now in the Mountain West. As I mentioned, beating New Mexico, a huge win on a buzzer beater shot, left the New Mexico crowd stunned. And then we got Indiana, obviously that huge win against Purdue. They now swept Purdue this year. Indiana's playing really good basketball. Watch out for the Hoosiers. And then Southern Mississippi. And then Kentucky going to be jumping it to a 6 seed. And we got Arizona, as I mentioned, Arizona State new to the field there. And then USC jumping up to a 10 seed. And then in the Midwest region here, Houston is the number 1 seed right there, just continuing to dominate. Texas A&M dropping down an 8 seed, as I mentioned, losing to Mississippi State. They were a 6 seed, so a big drop there. Illinois going to be dropping down to a 9. They lost to Ohio State. TCU jumping it to a 5 seed, as I mentioned, beating Texas Tech just barely. A huge win for them. And then Bradley going to be new to the field at a 12 seed. Xavier going to be jumping up to a 4 seed. And then Arizona, as I mentioned, a really tough loss for them against Arizona State by that half-court shot to lose. And then Baylor getting a big one against Texas and holding on against Oklahoma State last night. So they're going to be jumping it to a 2 seed, and Eastern Washington going to be falling to a 15. In the West region here, we got Kansas as the number 1 seed there, and then Missouri going to be jumping it to an 8 seed. Missouri, I don't entirely remember who they beat but they got a big win over the weekend. And then Iowa State as just a very tough loss to West Virginia. I mean, yeah, Iowa State's just not playing very good right now in the Big 12. They've really fallen off, and then they've fallen even out of the top 25 right now. And then Auburn going to be dropping down to 11th seed, and then West Virginia, as I mentioned, beating Iowa State, going to be jumping up to a 10. On the road, too. In the East region here, we got Purdue as the number 1 overall seed, still as the number 1 seed, even with the loss to Indiana. I guess UCLA just almost lost to Colorado. I guess it wasn't enough, or Kansas State as well. That would be crazy if we had 2 Kansas teams as number 1 seeds. And then Pittsburgh going to be jumping up to a 9 seed. We got Iona jumping up to a 12 seed. Creighton losing to I want to say Marquette, maybe UConn. I think actually maybe UConn. I'm not entirely sure who they lost to, but all I know is they lost to someone. And then Nevada, as I mentioned, losing to Wyoming, dropping down to an 11 seed. And then we got Furman new to the field at a 14. All right, but let's look at the full bracket here now. Let's start out with the first 4 games. We got Wisconsin and Arizona State. I'm picking Arizona State, although that's a good matchup between those two. Morehead State, I do think, can beat Alcorn State in that game. And then Mississippi State, I think, will be able to hold off Boise State. And then Fairleigh Dickinson can beat Howard. All right, so 40 spot in the round of 32. Alabama is going to be able to handle their business against Morehead State. And then we got a good matchup between Iowa and NC State. As I mentioned, huge comeback for Iowa. I just believe in them a little bit more with that offense. So explosive there. NC State's a good team, though. And then we got a good matchup between San Diego State and Oral Roberts. I'm going to go with an upset pick here. I really do like Oral Roberts. San Diego State, don't get me wrong, they're a freaking good team. But I could definitely see Oral Roberts going to San Diego State and pulling off a huge upset. And that's what I'm going to pick right there. Who knows what I would do in the actual tournament, but sometimes with these bracketologies, you just got to have some fun with it. Indiana, I do think will be able to beat Southern Mississippi. Kentucky, I think, can hold off Arizona State in that game, as well as Marquette beating Colgate. All right, and then I'm going to have Duke pulling off the win over USC, as well as Texas beating Kenesaw State. All right, let's go down here. Purdue against Fairleigh Dickinson. I'm going with Purdue in that matchup. And then Arkansas against Pittsburgh. I'm going with Arkansas. Miami, I do think could beat Iona, as well as UConn pulling off the win over Yale. I'm going to go with an upset pick here. We're going to go with Nevada. I do like Creighton as a team, but they've been kind of struggling as of late. And I know Nevada just lost. I still very much believe in that Nevada program, kind of my team. I really do like Nevada. I think that they could win. And then Tennessee, I do think could beat Furman. Michigan State against Florida Atlantic. I'm going to go with a 10-7 upset. Michigan State just is an iffy team. They just have tough ways of closing out games. It wasn't just the Iowa game. It's been this way for some time here. I just don't know about Michigan State right now. I mean, like I said, just having a tough time closing out these games. And then Kansas State, I do think will be able to hold off Vermont. And then over here, we got Houston and UNC Asheville. I'm going with Houston in that matchup. And then Texas A&M, I do think it'd be Illinois, although those are 2 good teams there. I could see that matchup going either way. TCU against Bradley, I'm going to go with TCU, but I could see a Bradley upset there. And then I'm going to go with an upset pick here. We're going to go with Utah Valley beating Xavier in that game. Utah Valley, really good team. Really solid 13th seed, and Xavier's been inconsistent this year. I just don't know about Xavier. So I'm going to go with the upset pick there. I'm going with Utah Valley. And then Northwestern against Mississippi State, I'm going with Northwestern. Arizona, I do think it beat UC Irvine there. And then Providence against Memphis. I'm going to go with that's a tough one. I'm going to have to go with Memphis, though. They're playing – no, I'm going with Providence. Changing my mind on the fly. And actually changing my mind on the fly, I'm actually going to go with an upset pick here. I'm going to go with Mississippi State pulling off the win over Northwestern. Northwestern, really good team, but they've – I don't know. Mississippi State just beat Texas A&M. Coming off the first 4 game, it's been proven that a first 4 team has advantages. You know, getting that extra I guess, that game on their belt. I think that Mississippi State could pull off the upset. And then Baylor, I do think, could be Eastern Washington. And then down here, we got Kansas and Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. I'm going with Kansas. Missouri, I do think could beat Rutgers. St. Mary's against VCU. I'm going to go with a 12/5 upset here with VCU. I like these upsets. This is one of the few bracketologies where I've seen Joe Lendardi put together some good upset candidates. I like VCU in this game out of the A10. I think they're a really good team. And then Virginia against Hofstra. Virginia's struggling, but I don't think that they would lose to Hofstra in that game. I'm going with Virginia. And then Iowa State against Auburn. I'm going with Iowa State. And Gonzaga, I do think it beat Toledo, although I could see an Iowa-Auburn upset in that matchup. I'm just not going to go with it, though. And then Maryland against West Virginia, a 7 versus a 10 seed. We're going with Maryland. And then UCLA, I do think it beat Youngstown State. I kind of wanted to flip this on the fly. Auburn against Iowa State. Auburn just did not look good in the last game. I still believe in Iowa State as a program. So I'm going to keep it as it is. All right, so for a spot in the Sweet 16, Alabama, I do think it'd be Iona as well as Indiana, holding out the win over against Oral Roberts. And then 6C Kentucky, I think, could pull off a 6/3 upset. No disrespect to Marquette, but Kentucky is playing Kentucky basketball right now. They're going to be a scary team in the tournament, I think, this year. Although we said that last year and they lost to St. Peter's. But either way, Texas, I do think, can hold off Duke. And then down here, we got Purdue and Arkansas. I'm going with the Boilermakers. Although at this point, Purdue is at risk of losing in the second round. Miami against UConn. A 4 versus a 5 seed. I'm going to go with Connecticut in that game to pull off the win. And then I'm going to go with a huge upset. Ooh. Nah, never mind. I'm going to flip it. I really do like Nevada, but I just don't see that upset happening. I'm going with Tennessee. And then Kansas State, I do think, can beat Florida Atlantic. All right, over here, Houston against Texas A&M. I'm going with the Cougars. And then we got TCU against Utah Valley. I'm going to have to pick the Horned Frogs. Arizona, I do think could beat Mississippi State there, as well as Baylor pulling off the win over Providence. So a lot of chalk in the second round. We've only had that Kentucky upset. Kansas against Missouri, I'm going with Kansas. And then I'm going to go with a big upset pick here. I'm going with the Rams of VCU beating Virginia and beating St. Mary's. I'm not a big fan of Virginia right now. We saw them lose to North Carolina. I think that VCU, a good team out of the A10, can pull off the win over Virginia. And then Gonzaga against Iowa State. I'm going to go with Gonzaga in that game, getting that big win against St. Mary's. And then Maryland, I think, could pull off an upset against UCLA. I've been doing this for a long time here. UCLA, I'm not a big fan. I mean, they just beat Colorado barely. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of UCLA. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me in the tournament. All right, so all 1 seeds have prevailed here in 3 of the 4 2 seeds. And then Alabama against Indiana. I'm going to go with a 4/1 upset pick here. Let's go with Indiana pulling off the win. I really do like the Hoosiers program that they got building there. And then Texas against Kentucky, a 6 versus a 2 seed. I'm going to go with the Longhorns of Texas to pull off the win. And then we got Purdue against UConn. As much as I think Purdue could lose in the Sweet 16, right now I do think that they're a better team than Connecticut. I'm going with Purdue. And then Tennessee against Kansas State. I'm going with the 2-seeded Wildcats. All right, up here we got Houston against TCU. 2 Texas teams. I just don't see Houston going down there. And then Arizona against Baylor. I know Arizona just lost. I still very much believe in this program, though. Baylor almost blew a lead last night to West Virginia. Oklahoma State, which isn't too much of a thing, but I still believe in Arizona. I think that they could pull off the win against Baylor. And then Kansas against VCU. I'm going with the Jayhawks. And then Maryland, I think, could pull off a 7/3 upset over Gonzaga, just like they did UCLA. I had this Maryland team with Kansas last time. I just like Maryland a lot right now. All right, so for a spot, as the trend's been going, it's been Big 12 and Big 10 teams for me a lot of the times in the Elite Eight, and it's really looking like that again here with Kansas, Maryland, Purdue, Kansas State, Indiana, Texas. Obviously, we got American and Pac-12, though, so at least we got those there. But Indiana against Texas, a 4 versus a 2 seed. Let's go with Indiana pulling off the upset. I think if they can beat Alabama, they can pull off the win over Texas. So we're going to send Indiana, a 4 seed, into the Final Four. Purdue against Kansas State. I'm going with the 2-seeded Kansas State to pull off the win over Purdue. And then we got Houston against Arizona. Let's give Houston some love. I haven't gave them as much love over the past, but I think that they could pull off the win over Arizona. And then Kansas versus Maryland, as much as I would like to see Maryland advance, I have to go with the Jayhawks. So for a spot in the national championship game, Indiana against Kansas State. I do think that Kansas State is the better team there. I'm going with Kansas State. And then will we have a Kansas versus a Kansas matchup in the national championship game? I think we will. I'm going with the Kansas Jayhawks to beat the Houston Cougars and advance on to the national championship game, and where we will have Kansas State versus Kansas for the national championship game. These two have split the season series so far, but I think that Kansas will prevail and will be a back-to-back champion this year. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video today. Hopefully y'all enjoyed the content. Your champion will be Kansas in this bracketology. Anyway, peace.